format on April the 9th, 2015, with a second notice provided on April the 14th, 2015. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. We've also sent out specific letters of invitation to individuals to attend today's hearing. We have several bills on the agenda today. We have Bill number 56, introduced by Senator Aguon, 66, introduced by myself, 70, introduced by Dr. Underwood, and 74 also introduced by myself. I want to first thank my colleagues for being with me this morning. To my right is the Vice Chair of the Committee, Senator Frank Aguon. To the left is the Chairman of Rules, Senator Roy Respicio. To his left is Senator Mary Torres, Senator Tony Etta, and Senator Tommy Morrison. I want to thank everybody for coming this morning. We have a lot of people in the room, so let's get started. The first bill is introduced by Senator Frank Aguon, and I'll allow him to make a short statement about the bill and then invite those testifying.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker and Mrs. Chairman, and good morning to everyone. This is a proposal that was submitted by representatives from the Judiciary of Guam requesting consideration in terms of allowing the Judiciary to be able to administer and to acquire federal grants. And my initial question was whether, in fact, the partnership continues to be a very good working relationship with the Governor's Office, and the immediate response was yes. So this is certainly not a reflection of any differences that did not exist and does not exist between the Judiciary of Guam as well as the Governor's Office. It's just that this will provide the Judiciary of Guam with additional flexibility in terms of pursuing other federal grants that otherwise are not readily available to the Judiciary. So I thank you for having the public hearing on this measure, and we look forward to some of the comments to be presented.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to invite up the Administrator of the Judiciary, Mr. Joshua Tenorio, Ms. Kate Baltazar from the State Clearinghouse, Ms. Sophia Diaz from the Judiciary, and Serena Mariano. We'll start with Mr. Tenorio.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, members of the legislature. My name is Joshua Tenorio. I'm the administrator of the courts for the Judiciary of Guam. I would like to read my prepared testimony into the record. Thank you for providing the opportunity to testify in favor of Bill number 56-33, an act to amend Section 2101.1F and 2101.3 of Chapter 2, Title 5 of the Guam Code annotated, relative to recognizing the independence of the Judiciary of Guam relative to the receipt of federal funds. In recent years, the legislature has amended 5 GCA 2101.1F to exempt the University of Guam, Guam Community College, and most recently, the Department of Education from requiring the final approval of the Guam State Clearinghouse when applying for federal funds. This legislation will simply add the Judiciary of Guam to the list of government entities already exempt. The legislation will properly recognize the judiciary as an independent and co-equal branch of government as it relates to the receipt and expenditure of federal funds, and will empower the judiciary to pursue funding opportunities limited to state and local courts by the Department of Justice, the State Justice Institute, private foundations, and other funding agents. This authorization will not be applicable to grant opportunities requiring designation by the Governor of Guam as a state agency authorized to apply for grant funding. In these cases, we would continue our working partnership with the Office of the Governor and the Executive Branch to address programs that improve the criminal justice system of our island. The Judiciary of Guam is already the recipient of grant funds that provide direct services, resources, and programs to support collaborative work with the Guam Police Department, the Department of Corrections, the Office of the Attorney General, and the Department of Youth Affairs. We will continue to find opportunities for system improvements and continue to partner with these agencies. The Judiciary has an excellent record of accomplishment in managing and expending federal resources to improve and expand effective services for our patrons. Our Court Programs Office is on an aggressive track to develop programs and apply for funds to expand and enhance our therapeutic strategies, reduce recidivism, implement evidence-based programs, manage sex offenders, incorporate technology, and address courthouse security. We have seen program successes in the Sex Offender Registry, the Adult Drug Court, the Juvenile Drug Court, the Mental Health Court, and the Family Violence Court, with work underway in the newly established Veterans Treatment Court and the Justice Corps program. The Judiciary recognizes that the sharing of information across the government of Guam is extremely important towards efforts to maximize federal assistance to the island, and will continue to do so if Bill 56-33 becomes law. I just want to, for the record, to introduce our staff attorney, Sophia Diaz, and our court programs administrator, Serena Mariano, who principally is in charge of administering and applying for the federal funds we're talking about.
So they will not be offering testimony this morning?
No, they're here to answer questions.
Okay, great. Ms. Baltazar?
There you go. Half a day, Chairman Aguon, Vice Speaker Cruz, and members of this committee. I'm Kate Baltazar, the administrator of the Guam State Clearinghouse. I'm here before you today to unequivocally testify against the passage of Bill 56-33. There are three pillars of purview for the Guam State Clearinghouse, two of which I will speak on further to support our position. The first pillar of purview of the Guam State Clearinghouse, known as intergovernmental review, while granted under local law, originated in a 1983 executive order issued by then President Ronald Reagan. This is a mechanism to ensure a way by which grant applications are reviewed by various entities, to include legal, Bureau of Statistics and Plans, and fiscal, determining whether the grant application is in line with various state and territorial plans. In so doing, this would make certain that government resources are not overcommitted in the proposed projects and are utilized accordingly. This system of checks and balances is in place to safeguard our already overcommitted resources. Passage of this bill would remove the critical and necessary means by which we determine that only the most effective and essential proposals are sent forth. No branch of government should be exempt from this process, directly contrary to the presidential executive order's intent. In addition, many federal funding agencies require intergovernmental review for various projects, not solely as a GSC policy, but as mandated by the federal government. There exists a document published every fiscal year that lists these programs as provided with my written testimony. Input from across the country, by and large, include their judiciaries in the intergovernmental process. My colleague Sheila Lambert from the state of Nevada notes, Nevada's judiciaries participate unless specifically excluded by the federal grant announcement, as is our current practice at GSC. We operate under the premise that the state cannot overrule the federal EO, regardless of agencies. We operate with the Judiciary, Attorney General's Office, District, Municipal, and Supreme Court in the same way. It is not a matter of what agency or branch of the government, but more about ensuring a federal compliance with grant funds of which our office is responsible. Our second pillar of purview is monitoring and compliance. This has been a dormant power, admittedly, of the Guam State Clearinghouse in past administrations, which is apparent in various agencies with a high-risk grantee status in years of millions lost or returned federal funding. Since becoming the administrator, the Guam State Clearinghouse has been ever more aggressive in monitoring federal grants across the board throughout the government. We have saved millions of dollars and potentially lost federal funding through our advocacy with federal funding agencies, corrective action plans, and increasing capacity and skills through an annual grantsmanship training. Monitoring and compliance is a provision granted by law and when exercised has proven to be effective and beneficial to our government. I will close my testimony to this good body with this. In practice of good government, we amend our laws to become more aligned with meeting federal standards and requirements, to provide greater transparency and accountability. We must do all we can to encourage better monitoring and compliance of grants throughout the government, and this bill seemingly is contradictory as such. Dankluna Sedus Maasi, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this today.
Thank you very much for being present to give this testimony on this bill. I'll ask you to remain because on Bill 74, as it relates to DISID, I may need some answers from you as to their federal grant statuses. All right?
Yes, sir, Vice Speaker.
Thank you. Do any of my colleagues have any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just in regards to some of the points that you shared, first and foremost, I think, Mr. Tenorio, thank you for bringing your grants administrator and judiciary. I'd like to understand some of the concerns that the front office has, which obviously are very legitimate coming from your perspective. And the way I view this particular legislation is certainly not only recognizing the co-equal branch of government, but there are a number of grants that still must go through the state representative, which would be the office of the governor / the administrator of the federal grants to the executive branch. And this would not remove that particular process. It would just, and I hope that the grants administrator or Mr. Tenorio will be able to better explain the entire process. But I want to see if in fact there can be some clarification provided with regards to the issues that you expressed, because certainly this legislation is not in any way meant to be negative toward the administration, but to provide the Judiciary of Guam with an additional tool that they can go out and much more aggressively pursue federal grants. So, Mr. Tenorio, or?
Well, I think that the first thing I would say is the testimony that Ms. Baltazar has presented and the arguments that she's making actually, I think, are offensive to the judiciary. It makes it clear that they intend for the judiciary to be subordinate to the executive branch and to be subject to their review and compliance. And I think that that is counter to the separation of the powers. And the second thing that I would refer the committee and the members is to reference the White House Office of Management and Budget website, which lists that there are only 20 states remaining in the union that have intergovernmental review by clearinghouses. We are not suggesting or recommending that the clearinghouse be abolished in Guam, but if you're going to further review this matter, as she said, based on federal policy, then you'll see that the trend and the majority trend of the states of the union are to move away from such intergovernmental affairs, intergovernmental review for government entities to be a bit more competitive with each other to make sure that the right kinds of programs are being funded. So that would be my response.
Thank you on that position. I noted that you edited out a bolded part of your statement this morning.
I did, Vice Speaker.
And I think it addressed something that Mr. Tenorio just mentioned. The separation of powers and the statement that you bolded in your written testimony, but you edited out and did not utter, was not to mention egregiously eroding the power of the executive branch. Was there a reason for that?
Yes, and I just would like to thank Josh for those comments. I could see how he would feel that this is the tone of my testimony. However, I think the point here is that we do not believe that the judiciary is subordinate in as much as it is a partnership, and we certainly don't seek to overstep or encroach on the separation and recognition of independence. We do congratulate the judiciary. They have a stellar, outstanding performance on their grants. That is to be noted. However, we cannot be for diminishing the powers that we already have, to answer your question.
Will the Clearinghouse be submitting testimony from the governor asking this legislature to repeal the exemptions given to the other agencies that have the powers that we've exempted?
If you're referring, Vice Speaker, to the Department of Education or UOG, they are under executive purview in some way or fashion. So in some sense, we already can see and take a look and have some input on some of their funding. While they do not come through our process, they are still under executive purview. So to answer your question, I don't feel that testimony is necessary to repeal their exemptions.
So there's not going to be legislation to ask for that?
At this point, no.
And as to pillar number 2, monitoring and compliance, has the Guam Clearinghouse had any problem with monitoring and compliance of the grants by the Judiciary, or does your comment about their stellar performance stand as it relates to this pillar number 2?
It certainly does stand. As I've mentioned, we've had a really good working relationship with their federal programs. Jackie Zahn and Cruz was before, and now Serena, Ray Dunca, and the team. We have a wonderful working relationship with their court programs office, and we do not have any issues at this juncture with their monitoring, compliance, performance, deliverables, etc.
In the 4 years that you've been in this position, has there been an issue with the Judiciary in any of their applications that you would have pause or reason to, or cause to not want to have the Judiciary outside of your purview?
No, Vice Speaker, and the GSC, I think, to the Judiciary has not been a hindrance by mere fact that they currently do concurrent review, which is not preclusion to application. So they don't need, in some instances, our clearance to apply for grants, but they do so as a courtesy just to make sure that they're running it through our processes as well. So in essence, we're not a hindrance in as much as we are a partner in ensuring that the projects are sound as applied for.
And the protocol currently is the grants they can apply for without going through you, they've actually run through you anyway?
Absolutely. Yes, Vice Speaker.
And the grants that they have to cooperate with you in applying for, because it's either an executive agency like the Guam Police Department or the Attorney General's office that needs to be the main grantee, they work together with you in that.
That's correct.
And you can't point to any point in the last 4 years when you've been the head where there's been a problem with your relationship with the Judiciary as it relates to either the grants that they can apply for directly, or the grants that they have to apply to conjointly with you?
No, we have not taken issue with any of their applications, but we do certainly appreciate the relationship that they send forth through our processes concurrently.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a follow-up to your last question. So even if this bill passed and became law, there's nothing that would stop the current relationship. There's nothing that would stop the Judiciary from having the Guam State Clearinghouse as a courtesy concurrently review these grant applications. Do you foresee that relationship can still continue?
Yes.
And I think that's where you would draw the fine line and respect the separation of powers authority. I remember when this was amended to take out the Guam Community College, the University of Guam, the Guam Department of Education, because to have to run, we're recognizing that these agencies deal with education, and that's something within their scope of authority. And I think at the time there was some concerns with your predecessor in how long the review took, and how this government was actually losing opportunities to pursue these federal grants because of this review requirement. But I think the bill, if we're going to approach this, as the sponsor said, which I absolutely agree, that it's time that we examine all of our statutes, and anywhere where there's some semblance of micromanaging a third branch of government and not respecting a third branch of government as it being a separate but co-equal, I think I certainly will support something like that. So I understand, Ms. Baltazar, where you're coming from. I would probably take the same position if anybody wanted to take any of my authority away, but as you admitted in your testimony and in your follow-up responses, you really have not exerted that authority over the judiciary, and as you've never really told them don't pursue this grant, or has there been there's never been an instance where they've asked you to concurrently review something and you basically said, no, this is not in line with what the government of Guam is supposed to be doing, and so you've objected?
Well, Senator, while that's true up to this point, I mean, we can't foreseeably grant this in perpetuity, because in the future, such as grants that do require intergovernmental review, we may or may not, by virtue of this law, be able to provide that clearance, which will cause us not to be able to avail of certain grants.
But in most instances, if you're going to do something to make it in perpetuity, it would be based on a track record. And you've admitted that their past performance has been nothing but stellar, and I can certainly attest to what the judiciary has done over the years to pursue these federal funds and to provide for a holistic approach to therapeutic jurisprudence so that they're not totally reliant on general fund resources. And so I think the time is right. The judiciary has proven themselves, and I hope that you would reconsider your position and embrace this, because if there's any semblance of this kind of relationship continuing, really it would be your approach to this bill. And again, I would hope that you would reconsider. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here and providing testimony. Ms. Baltazar, how does this impact the GAC? Is there a administrative cost impact to the GAC as a result of this? If this legislation was to go through, would this impact any resources to the GAC?
Thank you, Senator. No, there's not. While there are indirect costs that are captured by the government, they're spread throughout the government. So essentially, it would not have a financial impact on our office whatsoever. And I thank you for commenting, as I remember you were working for then Senator Cleo Moylan in modernizing the current statute. So thank you for that comment.
Right. And again, I was leading in that direction because I remember we were there was many folks involved in trying to expand the GAC and the level, and having a fully functional clearinghouse with housing many grants administrators throughout our government, and just having them go after whatever funding's available out there, as they do in not only on the states and other jurisdictions, but also territories where these models are in place for where there's so much opportunity, but they were housed, and that was the vision behind that, really, at the end. But I think I'm glad my colleagues brought up the separations of power, but I'm more or less focusing on the intergovernment review process. Does this, impact any? Can you make it clear to the committee that this does not impact any process?
Well, certainly. Because
apparently, this has been in place for many years, and we see the relationship that is there. I remember working closely with the Judiciary as a member of the State Clearinghouse from the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, and on some great grants, and I'm very aware of the capacity there of those folks there that help to facilitate these grant programs. Do you see that this would impact the intergovernment review process in the future?
I feel as though it won't. Truly, it will not. There's nothing absent of this bill that precludes them from seeking federal assistance, applying for federal assistance, getting grants directly, and we're not a hindrance to that in any way. I mean, obviously, they do so quite regularly and manage their grants. Absent of this bill, there's nothing that would cause a hindrance.
Okay. Last question, Mr. Chair. You noted here in your testimony that the Bureau of Statistics and Plans is a member of the Guam State Clearinghouse, and has there been plans to look at how when we look at building capacity or growing the membership or building the continuity with those folks that go after such grants and that are available to our island? Have you looked at the BSP as an agency to build upon the capacity? I've always looked at it as an arm of the executive branch that could also house many administrators that mainly focus on grant opportunities that are available as a support agency to direct support to the GSC. And I know there's guys out there like Terry Quavo that have great ideas, and we were working some plans, but some discussions with the Lieutenant Governor at the time. But have you seen any plans that are being pursued to that end?
At this point, Senator, we have not, but we are open to that, and that is something that we can take back and explore further.
Okay.
But in relation to what we're discussing today, I do hope that this doesn't come across as a means to encroach on powers. We do respect that they are a separate and equal branch. Absolutely, no, there's no contention there. However, I feel that there is no room to gamble with our future and our federal funds, and not having a way by which certain programs are vetted, if not all. If I certainly had my way, there would be a full-fledged Guam Office of Grants Management. We've just seen, well, not with the Judiciary, but just in light of high-risk grantee status and funds that are returned every day. I wish I had that capacity, to make sure that, one, we don't send forth applications that are unrealistic or have deliverables that are not in line with our plans to begin with. And unfortunately, we don't have that capacity. However, at this point, I just feel that this is not an encroachment on powers. It's just we can't be for diminishing the powers we currently have.
Well, I'm very glad that you're there, Ms. Baltazar, and I'm glad you brought out some past visions of former lieutenant governors that really want to see the GSC expand and go after grant opportunities, because we see other territories that aggressively seek these opportunities for their territory, and the vision was always there that because what I see and from experience is grants administrators are doing their best and reaching out to whatever opportunities are available. However, they also not only the grants administrator, but they're also the implementer of these grants. So they stretch themselves very thin, and where they can go. We have a house that continuously goes after these grants and just farms them out to the necessary agencies and let them start with the implementation. But because the way things are designed now, we're seeing grants administration bringing in the grants, going after formula grants, competitive grants. However, they're also becoming tied up with the overall implementation all the way to the end result of that grant. And they end up stuck instead of going after another grant. So I hope we can bring those plans back into place. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Josh, and Judiciary to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Actually, Ms. Baltazar, you brought up a very sore point with me, because it would seem to me that the Clearinghouse should pay more attention to the executive branch currently. And as you put it, I wasn't the one that said it, you were the one that broke it open, that every day there are executive branch departments that are sending back millions of dollars. Some of them are sitting in this room today. And it would seem to me that you have your hands full and should probably tend to your branch of the government and leave the one that you yourself describe as stellar performance in compliance and implementation to handle themselves. But keep your house clean first.
I don't disagree with you, Vice Speaker. Absolutely. Noted.
I'll be sending another for you to find out how much has been returned in the last year. I have been trying to get from the departments, and it just shocks me every time I find out how much we're returning. But I think at some point we're going to need to find out exactly how much or how well you're complying with your second pillar of monitoring and compliance. Thank you. Further questions? Thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you.
The next bill on the agenda is Bill number 66, an act to amend Section 2AF of Chapter 1 and Chapter 1 of Part 1, Chapter 2, Public Law 32-181 to add a new Section 17 to Part... Anyway, it's all relative to appropriating startup funds for the territorial education facilities funds for the Guam Department of Education, Guam Department of Education Early Childhood Education Program, pre-kindergarten program, and to provide additional funds to GDOE for its operations as a result of the enactment of Public Law 32-219. I was the author of this piece of legislation. It's been no secret I've been trying to get GDOE to start up pre-K. In fact, the poor superintendent suffered me for some time during the last budget hearing for his failure to not include the pre-K program in his budget request. I was very happy about a month ago when I noted that the superintendent wrote to the speaker asking for 1.2 million or thereabouts for the startup of the pre-K program in 4 pilot schools. I was so excited. I had to find money to make sure that they got it. I tried to put $4 million in last year's budget that nobody wanted. So I'm going to try to find now, at least now they want 1.2, which I'm willing to provide for them. In the last month, almost coincidentally, when the letter came from the superintendent, the Director of Revenue and Taxation also issued a notice that the property values had been reassessed, and that he was expecting that the Territorial Education Facilities Fund would be generating probably, Ms. Baltazar, I may need for you to answer some questions on DISID when we come up. Oh, okay, thank you. That the Territorial Education Fund would probably be getting up to 35, or at least he was saying 35 million in the press. OFB thought it would be 32 million, but whatever it was, there was going to be an increase. And if there was going to be an increase, I wanted to make sure that any increase in the Territorial Education Fund that had not already been appropriated would and should be set aside for the startup of this very, very important program of pre-K. Small as it is, the 4 pilot schools, but it is a start, and so I'm very excited about it, and that was a reason why I immediately introduced the legislation upon hearing that there was going to be a possibility of additional funds. The testimony that I received from BBMR is that I may have overestimated the amount by $63 million and thereby over appropriating $63 million, $63,000 in this bill. As I said, this was a placeholder, and I've written to the superintendent and asked how each classroom was going to cost $280,000 to start up. I'm hoping today he'll give me some answers as to how it's possible that one classroom was going to cost that much, and why playgrounds had to be in 2 different categories in the costing for it. So I would like to receive the testimony at this time, and I note that the only one here to testify, though I have received a letter from BBMR, is the Superintendent of Education, who I'd like to invite to the table to give the testimony. You can bring your team, please.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Speaker. You should have before you a copy of our testimony, and let me just, first for the record, correct, as we were trying to complete this, the copies this morning, the heading should read Bill 6633. It was a typo there. But we are here to testify in support of your bill relative to appropriating the startup funds for the Guam Department of Education pre-kindergarten pilot program, as well as for operations for the department. The funding includes the $1.1 million in startup costs, as well as the additional $985,000 for GDOE operations in general. And as you noted in the legislation, this has become necessary to address the impact of Public Law 32-219, which authorized in the middle of our current fiscal year additional funds for charter schools, including a newly established charter school, the iLearn Academy. So at the time that the legislature was reviewing this and we were getting calls about whether the Department of Education was in support of it, I made the statement that we definitely, I personally do support competition in our school systems, but with the way the funding was being drawn from our budget, I knew it would have an impact, and that we would probably have to come back to the legislature to address that. And that amount basically equates to the amounts that we were setting aside for the pre-K program. Mr. Vice Speaker, as you know and understand, and as you mentioned in your opening comments, the research shows that investment in early childhood education can pay dividends, very positive dividends for the community as a whole. It's research that many of you know and have been familiar. I know Senator Torres mentioned that her background in early childhood and interest. Well, the research has been out there, it's been developing. But now you're seeing more states taking it upon themselves to actually make it policy, to expand and perhaps even reach universal pre-K. In fact, President Obama has made that a priority for the federal government's allocation of resources. What I would say in that light is that I know that both Governor Eddie Baltazar and this legislature, this past legislature, were contemplating what that expansion might look like and discussing universal pre-K. But because of many of the costs associated with it, because of many of the issues that needed to be worked out, ultimately legislation did not get passed. But it was in that discussion where I thought that it was necessary to go ahead and move forward and try to see if we could pilot a more modest program. And in doing so, be able to test out some of our assumptions, be able to cost out what the investment would look like, be able to create that foundation, and then as we came back to it, as we collected data, be able to inform the discussion on it, as we go forward. So whether we're headed in a universal direction or not, I do think the expansion of our pre-K, pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds is the right direction to move in, and for that reason, we wanted to go ahead in the coming school year, 2015-2016, be able to provide that modest expansion, and then again report back both to our board, which approved this as we headed into this budget year, and then to all stakeholders about what we've learned and what we've seen. So we are committed to opening 4 pre-kindergarten classes. We have 1 in each district, and that was something that we had discussed both with the legislature and the governor as one way to move forward. And so the 4 schools that have been selected for the coming year include LBJ, which already has an early childhood model, Finnegodson, Marshall Sablon, and then JQ San Miguel. I think the thought process is if it works, if there is demand, then we would want to come back and be able to add additional schools every year until we perhaps get closer and closer to that universal goal. But for now, we contemplated 4, and we're also looking at perhaps the addition of 4 more in the coming school year afterwards. We'll also say that at this point we've done a lot of the planning. We've looked a lot at both from a facilities perspective, from an equipment and supplies perspective, from the teaching, from the teachers who need to be in the classrooms, as well as the registration process. We've begun all of that process to head towards the opening of these classes next year. The registration so far, has been out there, and there's probably going to need to be some more follow-up with interested parents in a couple of the schools. But at the latest count, Finagazan, these are classrooms that will be able to serve 18 students at the most. Finagazan, they've already returned applications for 50 of the slots, so 50 of the 18 that were provided. JQ San Miguel has 22 registrations that have been returned to apply for those slots. LBJ is, again, we're targeting 18 at the highest. They have 14 registrations turned in with an additional 26 registration forms outstanding. And Marshall Sablan, 20 registrations were picked up, 10 have been returned so far. So we'll continue to monitor that to see if we're able to support each of these classrooms. In your letter to me, Vice Speaker, we will be finalizing a response to, but we can talk to the information that we will be providing. You requested some clarification and justification for that budget, and so we will be able to address the various components, as you mentioned, and definitely want to talk a little bit about facilities. As I mentioned, because it's a pilot program, we're moving forward. We identify classrooms, we go in and inspect them, realize that there are costs associated and what that work will entail. And as we go through this process, we are going to learn more about exactly what level of resources will be needed on an ongoing basis. From the personnel side, we have budgeted in our request $165,861 to include the funding of a program coordinator to oversee not just the pre-K program, but the pre-K to third grade connection. So really supporting, so it's not just pre-K, but making sure kids are ready to enter kindergarten and that they're also able to sustain their progress through the third grade, where we want them to be proficient in the key content areas. These personnel costs are also prorated from August 15th to September 30th for 4 early childhood education teachers, 1 in each classroom, as well as 4 instructional aides. So that's the scope of the personnel costs that are anticipated. In addition, we requested $92,696 in operations to support the supply and equipment needs of those 4 classrooms. Those include instructional supplies, chairs, tables, classroom equipment, and some playground equipment as needed. Depending whether you're going to do individual playground fixtures or looking at some of the Head Start models, which is the entire playground structure. We want to look at which one makes sense. The budget request we can itemize and we'll provide the details, but those are based on our internal estimates, and which are generated from our experience in procuring equipment and supplies for all our classrooms. So we already go to a number of sources to provide these quotes, but you'll get these individual item by item quotations as needed to build up to that number. And then finally, which I think is the key cost, is the $832,259, which you equated to about $200,000 or plus for each room. So what I wanted to clarify is that amount is not only intended to support the 4 pilot classrooms, but we are hoping to support the beginning investments in beginning to retrofit or renovate additional classrooms for the coming school year. So that discussion we need to work out. If that's the direction we want to go and we want to prepare for an additional expansion beyond this school year, we'd like to start that work as soon as possible and have those resources that we can start to commit. So we don't need that entire amount, $200,000 per classroom. What I think we are in the range of right now, as we've walked through the recommended classrooms, is in the range of probably at a minimum $60,000 to $70,000 if you're just renovating. We're also learning that some of the classrooms identified, and you're well aware of the status of some of these facilities, that a much fuller renovation will get up to 6 figures, maybe $100,000 plus, because you're really talking about not just the walls and repairing some of the leaks here and there. You're talking about making sure the necessary equipment's in place, sinks, restrooms, and so forth. I will say that what happened in this process is as we contacted the schools, we gauged their interest in participating. We had community meetings in each of the 4 regions to gauge the interest. We asked them to identify whether they were able to identify a room that could be renovated for this purpose. And we moved from there. Once we identified and selected the schools, we did a deeper walkthrough, and we found out, and I guess that's why I mentioned this is a pilot program, we found out as we entered some of the classrooms that the work that we need to do was going to be a little bit more complicated. So if we're going to put in restrooms, we need to make sure they have access to sewage and water lines and so forth. So we actually had to work with the schools to relocate their proposed location of their classroom. So that's where the costs, I think, are going up, where we want to make sure that, the structure you recommended, that's not going to work. We needed to relocate elsewhere on the campus. So as we learn, we're going to go out and actually develop an IFB for those classroom facilities so we can get more accurate cost information when we put the projects out to bid and ultimately award it to a contractor. So without going into exact amounts so that we don't affect the procurement process, I would just give that general estimate that at the low end we were thinking around 50 to 60 for some some renovations, because those you definitely need to do the restrooms. And at the high end, it'll be 6 figures plus if it's more extensive construction that needs to happen. So we're in discussion with the schools right now about trying to make sure we minimize the expenditures as it makes sense, but still provide a good facility for our kids. So that's an active discussion we're having. And that concludes that we can answer any more detailed questions, and we will have those official documents submitted to you after the hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize. Before I ask any questions, I want to first commend you, Mr. Superintendent, and especially the staff and management at Tamuning Elementary School. I'm still trying to figure out if it's Tamuning Elementary School just or Tamuning Elementary School / LBJ. Because I thought both faculties were there yesterday.
They were.
And whether or not the WASC accreditation team had done both schools or just one school. Because that administrator is both schools, right?
That's correct. In fact, they've been treated as different facilities and sites in the past. But I will say WASC did come in last year to do the accreditation visit for LBJ, and then this year for Tamuning. There is now an effort to try to make sure to kind of align both campuses. And so the next step, based on the recommendations of the WASC committee, was to align the accreditation process to look at the overall K-5 classes, K-5 connection. So they will be treated as a single entity for future accreditation purposes.
And just for the listening audience, I want to congratulate you and the administration at that school for the excellent WASC accreditation exit interview that was provided that I witnessed and listened to yesterday. It was amazing how many positives there were, and even the issues of things that needed to be addressed weren't things that I would have thought that should be listed as an issue. I mean, one of the issues was maybe they should put the 2 schools together as one. And I didn't think that was an issue, but that was listed as one of the quote-unquote negatives. Not really negatives. I can't remember the
things to work on. Right?
We need to work on. But I think the one criticism that they had that I wanted to make sure that I assisted in today was making sure that the public knew what great work that school is doing. And that was one of the criticisms, was that they do a lot of really good work, and nobody seems to know about it in the community, and they needed to have someone or somehow get more press coverage on all the positives that are going on at that school. And I wanted to be the one that recognized that, especially since after I left there, I went, and the sermon last night was, you don't put a candle under the bushel.
Right.
And so I just wanted to like that and congratulate the Tamuning Elementary and school for its excellent WASC accreditation.
If I could just say that, to thank you for that comment, and really not just for us, but for the superintendent and the management here, but really what you say about the school level management as well as the faculty and staff there. I think you saw the evidence of a lot of hard work, and I just want to say thank you to all the senators who also actively get out to our schools and visit their schools, because I think you will see a lot of hard work being put in, a lot of positives, and absolutely, I noted the same comment that they had. Why don't we share this more broadly with the broader community? But I will say thank you as not just superintendent, but as a proud parent of Tamuni Elementary and LBJ Elementary students. Thank you.
I'd be afraid to be at that school since Mrs. Fernandez is the PTO president.
Right. She is. Right.
So anyway, no, seriously. Until I get the revised budget for it, I will hold on to this.
Yeah.
And the sooner you can get it to me, the sooner I can report it out. We have a session on the 27th, so if you can get it to me next week, it'd be great. The amount of money, and BBMR is saying that I'm off by $63,000. Either I take $63,000 from what's being set aside for the schools, or subtract $63,000 from the general operations amount, this 800-some thousand. But at some point, I want to make sure that this excess funds in TEFF is immediately invested in education, and I just need to make sure that we have that amount. But it would help if you could provide me that information at the earliest possible date.
So we have that information. We can provide much of it today, and by the end of the day, I'm sure we have it assembled. We were just trying to make sure we were going over it one more time. I just want to be clear that, again, we're doing this as a one-year expansion. We're already getting questions about what's happening next year and the year after that. So that's why in the capital outlay, and we could talk to you further about that, whether we can look at investing those as we look at the next year, because it does take a lot of lead time to make those selections and find those rooms. And the other thing, as you raise this issue of operations and the startup cost for pre-K. One of the issues we had was when it was discussed about the charter allocation being, given to a charter school. Just to note, as you realize, that it's not a dollar for dollar amount, that if one kid goes over, then we can remove a whole classroom or a whole teacher. What you'll see, and as we're studying the impact of charters, is that you do get students from this class and this school and this class and this school, but it doesn't equate to being able to remove an entire classroom, teacher's salary and classroom. You just have a couple of extra students less than you might have had, in the month before. So at the same time, we're taking that full amount per student and supporting the charter school. We're still having to support the current operating needs of those schools where they're losing a few kids here and there. And that's why, like you mentioned, there's some operating costs associated with that. We're still trying to work to meet the needs of our current students.
And in the selection of the classrooms in the schools, this is not going to deprive any grade level from a classroom.
No, so that's the work we're doing with the principals to ensure that. So it's all based on our anticipated enrollment, any trends there, and then identifying rooms that some of the rooms, just needed some work, needed some additional work. So some of our principals are looking and saying, this is a class that we could definitely use and could welcome additional students, but we couldn't do it without having an investment in not just making restrooms, but really shoring it up so it's a safe learning environment.
I'll withhold. I don't want to start micromanaging. I won't ask any further questions. Go ahead. You had a question? Oh, that's right. The other main proponent this last term of pre-K, Senator Tony Atta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Superintendent. I just have a couple of questions, and I think the very first and foremost question is, does DOE have the legal authority to establish a pre-K?
We are piloting a pre-K. So let me ask if we've looked at that issue. We do have the authority from the board to do it. It's not compulsory, so it's a voluntary pre-K program. So we've looked at that from the standpoint of whether for a compulsory program we would need broader statutory authority to do that.
Yeah, because the reason why I asked that is that I recall almost 10 years ago, then Superintendent Flores and legal counsel Fred Nishihara had told the Education Committee then that they didn't have the legal authority to establish a pre-K, and that they were only stated that DOE's statutory mission was kinder to 12. So that's why I asked that. And back in the 31st, and to correct that, what I did in the 31st was I introduced Bill 179, which would have done two things. It would have given the DOE the authority to establish a voluntary preschool, and then also it would have given the board the flexibility to seek funding, whether through grants or, whatever means they could to find the funding. So, those are the questions that I have. So, I mean, if we have to give authority before we start something, how are we starting it before we're giving authority?
Well, I'd be happy to kind of understand that argument. I know that we currently provide pre-K services. So we provide pre-kindergarten through the GATE program, pre-K GATE, and we also support a Head Start program. So those already serve the age group that we're looking at. So the voluntary program, what we did is ensure that the board was involved in approving and authorizing that from the board's perspective and allocating those resources and giving that kind of direction. So I'm not aware of a statutory obstacle, but we will definitely want to identify if there is one.
Yeah, so maybe you may want to go back to your legal counsel to find out whether you guys can establish a preschool program, legally establish one.
Right, I'm not aware of any obstacle, but we will look at that.
Okay, and the other issue I had was transportation. We talked about the classrooms, we talked about the teachers and playground, but we didn't talk about transporting these kids back and forth. Whose responsibility is that going to be? DOE or?
So it is going to be in the regular school schedule, and we work with DPW to accommodate.
Yeah, so, if you go back to Bill 179, look at it sometime, Bill 179-31, and what that did was it established a voluntary preschool program. But what it did is it put the onus on the parents that if they wanted to avail themselves of this preschool program, they had to transport their kids back and forth from school. So, because it being a pilot program, we want to make sure that, that everything was running smoothly before we start getting and making sure bus operations and all those things were able to accommodate before we actually had DPW also transporting pre-K students. Yeah.
Correct.
So you may want to check on those also.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think for that reason it guided our discussions about how to create these pilot programs. So number one of the issues was, can anybody just apply and attend? And the answer was we were setting these up on an attendance area basis so that we are within the bus routes that already serve the schools. And because it's a limited amount of students, we're not talking an excess, we believe we can accommodate. And of course, through the normal discussion with DPW, we would address that. It's just been a challenge to ensure that we did have sufficient resources to be able to move forward with the coming school year and in order to complete that discussion process.
So how are the kids selected then with the on being selected to be in this pilot program?
Right now, and again, this is a question that we can look at as we go through the pilot and go forward, is established as a voluntary program. You pick up your registration, you sign up. If there are in excess of 18 slots, we will do a lottery to select. Now, we have had inquiries already about, going forward, do we want to look at other qualifications or eligibility level, income levels and so forth. But for now, just to start out, we're going to do it on that basis. Head Start already serves an income eligible population, and then we have Pre-K GATE, which is a separate process. So we'll add this and look at that component to see whether we want to take a different approach going forward.
Okay, so then if you can just get back to the chair about the legal authority to actually establish one, and just to make sure that we're all in checks and balances and we're not putting the cart before the bull. All right.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Superintendent.
Thank you.
Ms. Saito. Sanchez. The next bill on the agenda is Bill 70-33. The main sponsor,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this bill 70 dash, supposed to be 33. Yeah. Okay. Okay. 70-33. It's an act to amend Section 41105 of Chapter 41, Article 1 of 17 of the GCA, relative to the creation of a registry for individuals with disabilities. I want to, as you know, and as we all know, Senator Underwood is not on island. She's off island at the moment, tending to some family needs, and she did submit to you a sponsor statement which lists 11 key points in this bill. And I know that she's been working very closely with DICID, and the director of DICID is here. So instead of reading all of these 11 key points, I'm sure that these points will be brought up during the course of the public hearing on this particular bill. But I want to submit her written testimony for the record, most if not all of which will be discussed as the panel makes its way to provide testimony on this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And we will highlight the sponsor statement that was provided by Senator Underwood, and we'll invite people up in groups. We'll have Ms. Ada, are you testifying? I noticed you were here before we even got here, so come up. Thank you very much. Wade? Is there somebody with... Oh, okay. I couldn't read the first name. I'm sorry. I could read... Make out Scott. Oh, okay. Angel Sablon? And Mr. Savino. Why don't we start with the First Lady?
Thank you. For the record, I would like to read my letter to you. Thank you. Dear Honorable B.J. Cruz, half a day. Thank you for inviting me to provide testimony on the following important matter. An act to amend Section 41105 of Chapter 41, Article 1 of 17 GCA relative to the Registry for Individuals with Disabilities. I agree with the intent of the registry to promote communication between law enforcement personnel, first responders, and individuals with disabilities and their families, and to further improve services to individuals with disabilities by creating a registry. DICID Support Services Division had a Guam Get Care system funded by the Aging and Disability Resources Program more than 10 years ago. This was a registry of programs and services that can be accessed by individuals with disabilities online. It was transferred to the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. Funding by the federal agency ended last September 30, 2014. The system was simple but expensive. Contractual services to run the system cost $300,000. Personnel, equipment, and supplies were not included. It was managed by a program coordinator for. The program assisted the Division of Senior Citizens in the submission of their state program report called the NAPIS, or the National Aging Program Information System. At the end of the project period, DICID must sustain it with funding from the government of Guam. DICID has no program staff capable of running the Guam Get Care system. Almost all programs in DICID were transferred to the current Department of Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. There are programs funded federally to implement a registry for individuals with disabilities. DVR has the SILC, called the State Independent Living Council, whose mandate is to establish a registry of individuals with disabilities. The Guam Developmental Disabilities Council, or GDDC, has in its 5-year state plan to implement a registry for individuals with developmental disabilities. And I've attached an attachment here defining the definition of developmental disabilities. The goal is to access immediate care in the event of a disaster. The objective is to facilitate the development and maintenance of a special needs registry to help identify people with developmental disabilities who may need assistance during an emergency. The registry is online and can be used to register only. It was developed last year, and we are now in the process of keying in all the forms. This registry is only for emergency responders. The GDDC will begin planning its 5-year state plan for 2017 up to 2021. The registry may not be included for the next 5 years, depending on the pressing and current needs of the developmental disabilities community. To designate DISID in the management of the registry for individuals with disabilities, it is necessary to include the population of individuals with developmental disabilities as defined in the federal mandate of Public Law 106-402, Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act of 2000, also known as the DD Act. Under this act, developmental disabilities are defined as severe chronic disabilities are caused by a mental or physical impairment or a combination of the two, are evident before the person is 22 years old, are likely to continue indefinitely, result in substantial functional limitations in 3 or more of the following major life activities, such as self-care, receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, self-direction, capacity for independent living, and economic self-sufficiency, and require individually planned and coordinated supports and assistance of a lifelong or extended duration. Individuals with developmental disabilities are almost always ineligible for vocational rehabilitation services due to the severity of their disabilities. They are the most underserved individuals in our community and in the government service system. It is recommended to include the aforementioned definition of developmental disabilities in the proposed creation of a registry for individuals with disabilities. Thank you for the opportunity to respond to this proposed act. Sincerely, Roseanne Adams.
Thank you, First Lady.
Thank you.
Mr. Savino, why don't we get yours and then we'll get the two.
Buenas and half a day, Senator and Vice Speaker Cruz, and members of the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication. For the record, my name is Ben Servino, and I currently serve as the Director for the Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities, DISID for short. Our department has had an opportunity to review Bill 70-33 Core, and I wish to express our support for this bill. The creation of this bill allows for the registry to act as a part of a system-wide access to allow our emergency personnel and first responders to be better equipped to handle certain situations placed upon them during the call of duty. This registry will allow for individuals with disabilities and their families to know that help is on the way. This is priority in certain situations when the individuals themselves or their families feel helpless. Allowing individuals with disabilities to provide important information on themselves that will ultimately assist them during times of distress is moving in the right direction. DISID was created to become the single point of entry for individuals with disabilities, and this bill would help to build the capacity for DISID to address such a need. If an individual with a disability voluntarily agrees to participate and to be included in the registry, important information regarding their disability could be accessed by first responders so that effective communication strategies could be utilized and first responders could be better prepared to provide the necessary accommodations and medical equipment to assist the individual. Another benefit for individuals with disabilities is that they would be able to receive valuable information regarding local legislative bills that have been introduced, such as Bill 70-33, or other federal laws that have been recently passed, such as the Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, which provides a tax-deferred savings account for individuals with disabilities. Individuals with disabilities would be able to also receive information regarding community calendar of events or available grants, such as the Individualized Budgeting Program that provides funding resources to address the critical needs of a qualified applicant with a disability. There are a number of agencies and organizations that have already established their own registry database of individuals that have accessed their program services, including DOE's Head Start and Special Education Programs, DIS's Division of Vocational Rehab and Division of Support Services Programs, the Department of Public Health and Social Services and the Division of Senior Citizens Program, the Guam Regional Transit Authority, Paratransit Services, and the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center Program Services, to mention a few. For your information, DISID had initially established an online registry. It was www.guamgetcare.org. That set up a client's profile and tracked the services that were provided by the participating agency partners. The online resource site was federally funded and administered through DISID's Aging and Disability Resource Center. Regrettably, funding and administration of the program was transferred to the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center under the permanent injunction process, and the grant expired last September 2014. The Department of Public Health and Social Services Division of Senior Citizens has actively utilized this website resource and continues to maintain the site to address their clients' needs. We are currently collaborating with the Division of Senior Citizens on a new 12-month planning grant process for a 3-year implementation grant through the Administration of Community Living and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, that focuses on long-term services and supports, which is entitled the No Wrong Door System. An online comprehensive database registry and tracking system, similar to the one used by ADRC, is also being considered as part of this initiative and incorporates its person-centered counseling and streamlined access to public program components. The Guam Developmental Disabilities Council has also established an online registry, which is limited to data regarding their constituents with developmental disabilities, and does not include a comprehensive approach to collecting data on other disabilities. DISID's registry would be more comprehensive to include all individuals with various types of disabilities, from birth to senior age. It would collect accurate and unduplicated data on the predominance of disabilities on our island, which would be very beneficial when applying for federal grants. Bill number 70-33 appropriates $150,000 from the general fund to DISID to be used solely for the creation and implementation of the Individuals with Disabilities Registry. This funding amount is sufficient to carry out the intent of Bill number 70-33 and would be utilized to cover the costs of a full-time limited-term program staff, possibly around the range of $35,000 to $40,000, which would be hopefully hired under the 2% law to manage and oversee the implementation of the registry. Other funding categories would include the cost for developing an aggressive multimedia campaign in the newspaper, the TV, radio, the mall, and the theaters, and this campaign will probably run around $40,000 to $50,000 to let the public know about the purpose of the registry and the benefits of the registry. As far as supplies and computer equipment, we're hoping to allocate at least $10,000, and printing costs between $10,000 to $15,000. And lastly, for the development of an RFP for the design, which will probably be a one-time cost of $15,000 to $20,000. And training and maintenance of the registry will possibly run around $12,000 to $15,000. Proposed funding requirements for subsequent years to maintain this registry would include costs for program staff, and again, $40,000 per year, for multimedia marketing outreach at $20,000 per year, for printing costs at $8,000 a year, and training and maintenance of the registry at $15,000 a year, coming up to a total cost of $83,000. As part of the marketing incentives, DISIT plans to solicit discounts from private businesses so that it can be provided to individuals that voluntarily sign up in the registry. The intent of the registry is limited to providing demographic information and the special accommodation needs of the individuals with disability to first responders. However, the individual with a disability may voluntarily opt to provide other information that may wish to provide. This will also ensure that the privacy and confidentiality of the information that is provided by the registry participants is protected in compliance with the ADA and HIPAA requirements, and that a consent to release of information form is signed by the individual with a disability to include a timeline for this consent provision. DISIT has already initiated discussions on Bill 70-33 core with some of the agencies that are to be involved in the implementation of this important initiative, and hope that the sustainability of the registry will be supported in future budget allocations. This is a major strategic effort in the identification of a population that almost always gets underserved. This bill will open doors not just for individuals with disabilities, but the ability for our community to assist everyone in years to come. I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide input in support of Bill 70-33 core, and I look forward to the continued support of the legislature and in the passage of this important bill. Respectfully, Ben Servino, Director of DISIT.
Thank you. Officer Wade.
Good good morning, Senators. I'm Lieutenant Scott Wade of the Guam Police Department Auxiliary Services Division. I've been instructed by the Chief of Police to come down and give verbal testimony in reference to this bill. I was informed by the Chief of Police this morning that he is in support of the bill, and that the Guam Police Department is ready to work with DISIT in implementing the bill if so passed.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Mr. Spillane.
Excuse me, Menana Jesus. It's always good to see faces of people that always support the Mayor's Council of Guam, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for always giving us your support. I come this morning to support the passage of Bill 70-33 to implement the registry for persons with disabilities. You know, the Mayor's Council of Guam has many registries, including a fragmented registry of persons with disabilities, and these come to us through the Mayor's verification for residency. Right now we get our lists from Catholic Social Services. We get our list from the Division of Senior Citizens from Public Health. We get our list from the Benefits Program Division from Public Health for the SNAP program, from DOE, from DISIT, from the Department of Revenue and Taxation for people that come there and apply for persons with disabilities as far as vehicle accessibility is concerned. We get lists from the Guam Council on Disabilities. So, as you can see, these groups of individuals, their listing is actually very fragmented. It's incomplete. It's double, triple, quadruple listing. It just doesn't serve them well. And as first responders, we are here to let you know that when it comes to emergencies like for storms and typhoons, many of the mayors and vice mayors already know where these people are located. But there are some people that we do not know where they are located because they're not on any of our lists. We certainly go out in the community to look for them, try to offer them assistance, try to get them to a safe location if they need to be moved. But simply, I applaud the legislation that it's about time we get one central bank that can have this kind of information. And I believe we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think the Mayor's Council of Guam can provide DISIT with the information that we have. that they can purge and find out whether these are the same individuals on the listing from revenue and taxation, whether it's the same listing as people that are on DSC or Catholic Social Services. So we already have, in fact, for the Mayor's Council of Guam, we have over 1,000 people that we have on our list that we have complete information on as far as their needs, their age, where they live, and any disabilities they have if they do have disabilities. And so in that sense, we are more than willing that if this is going to come to fruition, that we provide the information that we have. Unfortunately, we are no longer able to access Get Care. DSC has already advised us that they too are no longer able to fund this database. So as far as the Mayor's Council of Guam is concerned, every time a senior citizen or an individual comes up through the mayor's office or through the senior citizen's office, we just take their information. And as far as senior citizens are concerned, we have what we call the intake profile referral, where we get the complete information. And whatever information we get, actually, we provide to Get Care. So Get Care does not provide us any information. What Get Care has is information we provide to them from all of these entities. So they're just actually a storage database that these users can access. But right now, like I said, they're no longer contracted to provide that information. So again, everybody's on their own. We all just get the information that we have, and if we need to go to Catholic Social Services, if we need to go to DSC, we no longer can access it through Get Care. We need to do it manually on our own. So we fully support this legislation, and we stand ready to support this in its implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Inasmuch as he is the co-sponsor, I'll recognize Senator Respicio for the first questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to, on behalf of Senator Underwood, thank all of you for your participation. Again, I know that she met with you, Mr. Savino, early on in the formulation of this bill to get your thoughts and get a ballpark figure of what it would cost to implement this kind of registry. But you know, the bottom line is, as I see it, is that if the first responders have this information readily available in their database, as all of you have pointed out, if they respond to a home, let's say, God forbid, there's a fire in that home, they would know that there is an individual with a disability, specifically someone who is bedridden or immobile, and that's the first thing on their mind. Is they're going to go to all those rooms and make sure that you know, there's an individual in that with that description of that condition. They're going to know that no one is answering the door. Then there's a reason why, and they would make every effort to break that door down and go and provide those kinds of services. And so, you know, if you, I mean, there's also 11 points that Senator Underwood pointed out. I know the issue that's lingering in the minds of many individuals is, how would this comply with the HIPAA requirements? And the bill also addresses that it would be confidential and only those who need the information will get the information. Is there anything else that you foresee after the discussions that you've had with this bill? Any of you foresee how this bill may be amended to address some additional concerns which may have been raised over the last several weeks?
I've met with the IT staff at DOA and Will Castro, and one of the things that we talked about is security, and that's also part of HIPAA. You look at the security of the information, especially when you're dealing with electronic information exchange of health records or anything like that. You want to ensure, again, that the individual themselves consent to it, and we need to provide alternative ways for them to provide that consent. For some people with severe and profound disabilities that have developmental disabilities, they may not be able to write and sign off. So we need to look at interactive processes where some people can even use their thumbprint, and it can allow them to register and give that consent. So that, again, looking at the technology, I think that's one of the critical factors, because we need to ensure that the confidentiality, the information is protected, and that there are timelines. So the individual will say, okay, I'll give you this much, 1 year to allow access to this information, but they will be given an opportunity to also revoke that consent and say, hey, next year I revoke this permission or authorization, and only these individuals can have the information. But we want to try and encourage the individuals that do participate that, hey, this is going to benefit you in the long run, especially in emergencies or natural disasters where preparation has to be looked at, and accommodations have to be looked at, so there's effective communication, and there's no assumption about the proper communication styles that should be used.
And can you just discuss with us what those timelines are?
Well, again,
after, if, let's say, the bill makes it out of committee and the money is appropriated, the $150,000, what are the next steps?
Again, we're initiating the discussions. We're going to be proactive and also starting to work on the RFP and looking at the specifications for those confidential requirements under HIPAA. But we, again, want to stay on track with the January 1st, 2016 date for initial implementation. That's the target date. So we're really looking at moving forward and being proactive in preparation for that date.
Okay, thank you. And good morning, First Lady. Wait, I think the First Lady has a...
Thank you. Thank you. The GDDC already has online our registry, and it didn't cost us $150,000. And we will be, it's under the Government of Guam portal, and it only cost us about $2,600 to get a company to do the formal setting up of our website, and then $550 to maintain it. And if people don't have access to a computer, they can call us in, and we will record it on this form and put it as part of our registry. And people have called in because they don't know how to fill it out, or people come to our office and we help them to fill it out. And the information here that we have or are asking does not include their Social Security or any numbers that would cost any numbers or information that can be stolen. So it's very very limited and very exact. And what we wanted to do is actually know how many are developmentally disabled, because they're the ones that are really more underserved than any type of disability. So our system is not expensive.
Yeah, and as I understand this bill, the challenge is how do you get that data to be integrated with the Guam Police Department, the Guam Fire Department, so you don't have a paramedic going online trying to see if there's any individual with a disability at that particular house. So your database is extremely useful, but the challenge is how do we integrate that information into something that's going to be secured and only accessible by the first responders, because it'll be more than, it'll be detailed information about their health condition, whether they're mobile, immobile. And so, Director, could you speak more to that, so it's not just
Thank you. Yeah, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. I think what has been already
that's why I said the challenge is how do you
expand on it and ensure that there's that integration process within the different agencies. In fact, I've already met with the Guam Fire Department to look at their system, and they've informed me that their system is actually pretty outdated, and there is an RFP that they're looking at announcing.
Also incorporated into the E911 also.
Right, and that's what the RFP, they were trying to incorporate in the 911 so we can integrate into that system. And then also looking at Section 508 requirements for equal access in the information technology, and that's a requirement under the federal law. And the governor of Guam has signed an assurance that we will comply with 508 standards. And, I actually went into that registry, but I started to, but was a little bit difficult to navigate, and especially since I didn't want to put false statements, because I'm not a person with a developmental disability. It's mainly restricted for people with more severe and profound disabilities. But just trying to navigate it was a little bit of a challenge for me. But I think we can work the kinks out of it and try to integrate it with the system that we're going to try to put out when we do the RFP and start to really go into detail with the specifications.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My question was along the practical lines, and Senator Respicio touched upon it. I know that within the Guam Police Department, I remember having a tour once of a vehicle where you have the capability to access data on there, and I know it's integrated with the court systems as well. So perhaps that could be the tie-in, because there are two things that cross my mind as I'm listening to this in the practical application of this law and the database for a first responder. One is if they have ID on them, then that's a given. The ID, and this bill provides for an ID, but short of that, and the person is not at home and they're not with another person, another responsible person, how would you ensure that that you have ready access? Because the key here is appropriate attention and timeliness.
I'm not sure what vehicle you toured. The Guam Police Department police vehicles are not equipped with a mobile data system.
Okay, I do recall a tour when I was with one of the government agencies of a system that had within it a computer that had access to data, and perhaps it was something that is not implemented right now, but I was aware that system was available, and this was perhaps 2 years ago. So that doesn't exist within that's not accessible right now to patrol officers on the beat? Access to data?
Not in a mobile platform within a vehicle, no.
Okay, so I'll have to have that discussion with the police chief, because I recall seeing that system. The other question I had is, this is a volunteer system where people come in and register at their own will, and it's also contemplated that if they have changes to their situations, which I imagine is including medical treatments and the like, they will have that registered. Now, what do you do in the event that information is outdated? Where does the liability stand if the responder is relying on information that is outdated or is not current, or there are other circumstances that develop that the individual or their family failed to report? Liability issue. Sure, please.
Again, as we look at the timelines, our intent is to give the consent to release for 1 year. After that 1 year, again, the following year, we need to really follow up with the individual. They want to continue to provide that consent, and maybe at that time we can get an updated assessment of their condition, and that could be included in the registry. So we want to try to, again, be more proactive and be able to get current and more updated information, and we leave it at a year, because that's how we're doing it right now within Division of Vocational Rehab. Any type of consent that we get from the clients, we always go back after a year to update their information.
Senator, in our case, as far as the senior citizens are concerned, we update our info annually. So every January, we go right back to our system and out to our records and update all of that system to make sure that all that information is still current. As far as the mayor's verification is concerned, it's only updated as when the families or the head of the household comes in to either add, delete, or remove themselves from that village. As far as security is concerned, for the IPRs that we do, even I cannot access that information. We provide a password to
to the individual that's responsible to operate the system or to access that system, and only he or she can get that information. And this last storm that we had, we received a listing from DSC that told us that we need to look for these people in the villages because they may need assistance as far as transporting or giving them into a safe place. What we find out in the villages is that many of our families they don't want the assistance. They rather have their families come and take them to wherever they need to go or whatever assistance they have. But for the few that do require the assistance because no family is there, the stumbling block that we face is that the Mayor's Council or the mayors themselves are not equipped with transport equipment to take these people out of these homes. And maybe somehow, somewhere, there can be a mandate that at any time that there's an emergency or storms, that these vehicles that are equipped with for persons with disabilities, that they be allowed to be used during these emergencies, not just Gov Guam school buses, because we just can't put them in there or put them in the back of a pickup of a mayor's truck. And I know that there's the hassles here is that they say that these modes of transport are federally funded and they can't be used for this reason or that reason, but we've got to find a way that if we're going to be able to, what's the use of a list if we can't provide them the assistance because we don't have the equipment or the method to do that? I know in Deredo that Mayor Savard practically just called his people, lift this person up and put him in the pickup and let's take him because there's no other way. But if we can think about that and find some way to mandate that the agencies that do have these modes of transport, that they make them available in times of storms like condition 2 when we really have to move people.
Senator Torres, how we keep track with our people with disabilities, we have 3 standing committees in our council. So each committee we have asked them to be on the lookout in their villages and let us know who has passed on or who needs help and all that. And we do look at the newspaper for announcements on the obituaries and all that. And we cut out the clippings for those individuals that have passed on and put it in our files. And that has worked out quite well because our council members really call one another to find out what's going on in their community, and they do report to us when we have our council meetings or our standing committee meetings. So they're really valuable to us because they do keep us informed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was just thinking of the practical application of it, and I appreciate your input.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for your input. It was mentioned, Mr. Savino, with the $150,000 appropriation, that this will be solely for the implementation of the creation of the registry. And I know you gave a breakdown to how that will be portioned out. However, I'm not sure if I heard a maintenance component of this $150,000. How much was?
I actually included it as part of the cost for the maintenance and training because it involves both.
So this you're looking at $150,000 annually. So this is not only for the solely creation. Oh. We're going to look at after this is created and the registry is established, that on an annual basis this will be the amount.
Just to clarify,
okay.
The $150,000 is just to establish it right now, okay. Because there would be a one-time cost to set up the system, but for subsequent years, we're looking at half of that cost, maybe up to $83,000, okay. Not the full $150,000.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because I was concerned that we've got this all set up, in the long-term. Maintenance of it is built into this, and the development of this RFP or to develop this registry, we are working in coordination with the Office of Technology, as you stated earlier.
That's correct.
So they will be helping you develop that
Absolutely.
that RFP.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, we really need to stress the fact that, not only is the maintenance and the training of the registry, but also training of the staff and the law enforcement officers and the enforcement officers on the strategies and the implementation, how it's supposed to be implemented.
And also there's some marketing.
And marketing,
because
mostly important.
You're right, because, you're going to have a great system up, and, it's not good if no one knows about it, right? So I appreciate that you're focusing on the marketing aspect to get the word out, and ensure that those that need to be in this registry are aware of it. So now the E911 system, I'm glad you brought it up, because and Senator Respicio brought it up, because I was going to mention that we've been in discussions about this issue, ensuring that those with disabilities, aside from the registry, that this technology, the new E911 system that is going to be put up, is compliant to ensure that those with disabilities have access to the 911 system. And that again, if this is part of the training, and however you're integrating that, I appreciate that, because that's the whole goal of this whole new E911 system, is that everyone has access to it.
Especially with the new requirements by FCC to allow people who are deaf to use their text telephone to communicate with the 911 system. And currently, that isn't in place yet. We are required by FCC to ensure that 911 systems incorporate that technology.
And also with those, based on the registry and the locality of these individuals with disabilities, that the technology, because of the global mapping system, GPS systems, that because what's noted there in information will be able to identify much more efficiently, because of the technology, the global mapping system, knowing where that device came from, or where that call came from, where that text came in, we can respond a lot more efficiently. So I'm glad that you're moving in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I was surprised that this bill came to my committee. It only came to my committee because of the $150,000 appropriation. Yes, no. And so I'm going to have to try to figure out where to find the money. And it seems to me, Mr. Savino, how much did DISIT get in federal grants in the last year?
Again, for the federal grants that we receive, it's mainly towards the Division of Vocational Rehab, focusing on gainful employment for people with disabilities. Our local funding is very limited, and the appropriation is very limited. And
I wasn't talking about the local funding.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the federal grants that you have. Surely there must be something like the Take Care one that they had in previous years. Is there something in the federal grant programs that would have allowed for an application to underwrite the cost of this kind of a program?
Well,
there was a registry in the past. You guys have had registries. There's been federal grant money for registries. Is there currently federal registry money in any of your...
Currently, there is no federal grants. As I stated in my testimony, the Aging and Disability Resource Center did receive a federal grant, almost $250,000 to $300,000, to again look at options counseling, look at consumer-centered approaches, and that technology. And as First Lady had shared, that system was quite expensive. And we didn't get the funding for it. And again, under the permanent injunction, that program was taken away from DISIT and given to the Guam Behavioral Health. So we didn't actually have that grant for the last 2 or 3 years. It's actually true Guam Behavioral Health. But we were using the
But that was a federal grant.
Yes, it was. But it's
I'm
expired.
I'm dismayed that Ms. Baltazar decided that she would go out the door and not come back, because I wanted to ask, what's the relationship between your agency, her agency, and behavioral health and wellness? I mean, it would seem to me that somehow, all three of you being in the executive branch, somewhere that even if you didn't use the internet, that you would communicate with each other to try to do some of this work together. What is the...
Senator, the Guam GDDC, that's federally funded. We are not a service provider. We only collaborate with agencies, and we try to build capacity by collaborating with them and researching a lot of our data to support what needs to be done, because there's a service gap here, service gap there. So we try to educate our council members. Some of our council members are from the government agencies that serve people with disabilities. Like Ben is a council member, but 60% of our council members are people with disabilities, their parents, or any sibling that has someone in the family with developmental disabilities. So 60%. And the rest are providers. But our council does not provide services. We advocate, we teach our council members to advocate for themselves, to speak for themselves. We do provide disability sensitivity training when it's requested by DOA. And we do have a PowerPoint presentation that we do that whenever DOA says they have 5 or 6 agencies or employees that have signed up. So we do make time for that, and it is usually about 2 hours course or longer if they wish to have it longer.
Mr. Savino.
Can I add to that? We do collaborate, Senator. As she said, I am a member of the council. And I also collaborate with the Guam Behavioral Health, because they had a system when they were under the permanent injunction. They were required to develop their own system. And so we do try to tap on some of the information and not reinvent the wheel. The real challenge is because of the confidentiality of the information. It can't just be shared randomly without the consent of the individual. And that was the biggest challenge that we find. When we look at all the different programs that are federally funded, that requirement is always there. You cannot just pass it on without the consent of the individual giving that information to be released. And even with DVR, a lot of people have been asking me, can I get this information? I said, I really can't unless the client consents to it and signs an actual consent, because we don't want to violate the law. Because it's, again, under our rehab program, it's very strict about the release of that information, the confidentiality of the information. Each organization maintains their own database or registry of their clients that have access to their services, but we cannot outright share that information. That's one of the challenges. So with this registry, at least we can have them sign in and sign that consent so we can have access to that information.
Maybe it was prophetic that this bill came to me, my committee, on the same day that Senator Aguon's bill came to me, and to be heard on the same day that the Clearinghouse is saying they want to have monitoring and compliance control. It would seem to me that we had perfect example of two agencies dealing with the same types of individuals. Pretty close. You belong on her board because of the work that you do. It's not, and I wish that there was more compliance and monitoring from Clearinghouse on the executive agencies that aren't able to talk to each other. I have nothing further. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're excused. Ms. Mesa, Sam, and Maria Therese. Of course, he's not going to hear it.
Day, I'm Cynthia Mesa. First of all, I am in the Get Care system, and I haven't even been informed of anything. You know, any activities. I have to call up sometimes, and I feel like I get the brush off sometimes from people, workers, consumers, and I was in the hospital last month. And I'm trying to get back my Medicaid, and it's been about a month. I still have no insurance to see a doctor or to get medicines. And I almost passed away in the hospital. So I don't know what kind of service I'm getting, but I keep on submitting documents, and I'm still waiting for my social worker and behavioral wellness clinic. And like you say, between two agencies, how's it going to work out? Well, I'm somebody that a lot of people know is disabled, and I get treated differently by a lot of people. They get irritated for no reason. For example, I hear insults here and there. Yeah, and then I read the news about you got new additions to the disabled population. Those are the veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, I do know some. I know some of them. Well, at least one of them that was in Iraq, and that's my first. Not in Iraq, but she was enlisted in the army, and that was during the Iraq period. And she's in with the behavioral wellness clinic. And then I know of another veteran. He was sort of homeless, but he's dead. Poor water systems and everything. And people made fun out of him. And he was in the Marines and a doctor, believe it or not, and homeless, and denied housing and employment and unemployed. So he's dead now, but he just died this year. So I see so many sad incidences, and I hear about them in the news. And then when I see all these homeless people, and a lot of them are from the department, I hear snide, hateful remarks about them. They're not my equal. Those dirty poor people. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? I should say, excuse me, but I know them, especially when it comes to a few of them. It doesn't make me feel, when I returned back to Guam, when I was 43, I'm 57, I almost want to pack my bags and go back sometimes when I see that going on, especially most of a small island like this, and it's gets too close for comfort sometimes. You understand? Okay, so that's what I have to say. I didn't follow my notes, but it just came on. I just had to speak from what comes on my heart, my mind.
Thank you very much for advocating for yourself.
Okay.
Thank you. Sam? I won't attempt your last name because I don't want to insult you by mispronouncing it, so I'll just use Sam.
Yes, no problem, Your Vice Speaker. Mr. Chairman, Honorable Senators, my name is Sam Ilasugam. I work at Guam Army. Guam Army is a non-profit organization that provides different kinds of services to individuals with disabilities. I've been with the organization for a while. I've had the opportunity of serving in different capacities. So looking at this bill and kind of looking at my experience, it kind of gives me different perspectives. I see this bill as having two purposes. One is for crisis management, that's crisis intervention. Another is for it's a tool for to respond to a disaster or in an emergency situation. For the last few days, I've kind of tried to engage some individuals with disabilities that I work with or people that I have relationships with. And I've kind of tried to engage them in discussion on the bill. And my good friend here, Cynthia, is one of them. She actually provided me a written copy of her statement that if it's okay with you, I can give it to you.
I don't know so much of it. Not much of my writing is just kind of sloppy.
Okay.
I don't know if I should read it.
Okay.
Huh?
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk later. Okay, well, so looking at the bill and it's a management tool in emergency situations. So from a management perspective, it has practical use. It's very useful, right? it's always useful when you just punch some numbers and people's information come up in front of you. So it's, from a management perspective, it's useful. But then again, from discussions with the clients that I work with and some of my friends, it kind of gives me a different perspective. Especially when one of my friends kind of during our discussion asked me if you were an individual with disability, would you want your name to be on that list? And then I guess that's, while we're working on this bill, and I guess that's a question that I'm going to throw at you. While you're working on it, kind of put yourself in their shoes. If it was you, would you put your information at the fingertips of people that you don't know, people that you have no control over? So again, that's a question I'm going to throw at you. And my answer to that question was no. I wouldn't put my name on that list. But still, I see the practical use, okay, for crisis intervention, for disaster preparedness and intervention. So I kind of did some very quick research online. The first question I wanted to ask was to see if any other jurisdictions within the nation has the kind of registry that we're talking about. Yes, there are different registries, and I think like the First Lady mentioned one of hers. Guam has our own registry, but those are just for internal use. We're talking about a registry that's going to be shared among agencies. It's going to be used by people who I don't even know, right? So keeping kind of, going back again, so my question, my answer to that question was no. So I did the research, looked around on internet, asked some friends. I came up with only one, and that's the city of Chicago. That's the only place that kind of has a similar registry. Well, again, it still has practical use, right? For crisis intervention, for disaster preparedness and intervention. Still, the intent is there. I know what the bill is trying to get at. So I asked the same questions. What are they doing in other places? Well, based on my very kind of quick research, there are some models that are out there. For crisis intervention, there are some models that are advocated by SAMHSA, and I have something here on guidelines on how to kind of like plan out on some crisis interventions with mental health patients or clients. I know like our neighbors in Pacific, I have news reports here from Hawaii. They're implementing the same ideas that are advocated by SAMHSA, and this is the model that I find that they're using across the nation. And this is regarding crisis intervention involving law enforcement. And in some places they call it the crisis intervention team. In some places they call it the crisis response team. So it's applied everywhere. I just pulled out Maui as an example because that's the closest to us. So again, that's a model that we can look at in terms of crisis intervention. I have here, like I went to the National Alliance on Mental Illness to look at their what they do for crisis intervention. They advocate the same thing, crisis intervention team, and that this model involves law enforcement and mental health professionals, and it involves collaboration and involves training, involves providing the needed resources for the responding agencies. I just printed this out because according to National Alliance on Mental Illness, Memphis, which practices the same model, crisis intervention team or crisis response team, according to them, it's one of the best in the nation. So if you want to look at it, you can look at Memphis. Well, again, that's an approach. These are models that are more comprehensive and don't really require the use of the registry. And from my discussion with the people, with my clients and people that I work with, some of them are really nervous about this registry. They're aware of our situation here in Guam. They're aware of the history of how Guam works with confidential information. So it's a very risky thing for them. Okay, now to address this bill as a tool for disaster management. A lot of places there are models out there. I was able to print out just one, but there's a lot. And these models that I see that they're applying in different parts of the nation. It's just applying the universal approach, and that is providing more buses to transport, providing more accessible transportation, making sure we have the right people working together, like the mayor's office, the Department of Integrated Services, Guam Behavioral Health, people, just a lot of collaboration, a lot of training for first responders and trainings for police officers. Again, so those are some of the models that I think we can look at instead of creating this scary registry that a lot of people don't want to be on. I just want to share some written notes that were given to me by some of the people that I work with. They didn't want to appear in person, but they just wanted me to share this. So here's one, and it says, I would support the training of first responders. And this, I think, they mean instead of using the money to invest in a registry, invested in training for first responders on how to work with individuals with disabilities. I have many reservations on the registry or list of people with disabilities. Even on a voluntary basis, individuals may feel pressured to register in order to get services. Seems to me the service providers should know who and where their clients are located. But we know therein lies the problem. They don't know where their clients are. They don't even know if they're dead or alive. The training should be standard in academies, training curriculum, fire and police. Providers should also provide regular training for clients and family on what to do and where to go in an emergency situation. It needs to be a publicized training. That means service providers ensure clients participate. By the way, as transient as many of the clients are, who's responsible for updating the information on that registry? Also take a look at Guam Get Care, and that's the system that people were referring to earlier. Hundreds of thousands of dollars went into that. How is that working out? So that was one. This one is very short. It just says, what's the purpose of the registry? In case of a typhoon, will they go pick up people? Will they pick people up? I don't think so. They meaning the government. They can't even do case management without typhoon. Fix the transit system instead. So these are some of the things that I'm hearing from some of the people that I work with. So thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senators.
No, thank you, Sam. I did some research too, and I found that Chicago was the only one that did a similar plan that we were planning on doing. I was concerned about the profiling issue that I'm sure you didn't want to say that word, but I'm sure it was something that I was concerned about. And I appreciate the fact that you provided us with the SAMHSA-approved way of dealing with individuals with disabilities. And if you will please leave it with the staff, we'll make copy and return it to you if that's your only copy, if that's a copy for us, or just get the name. We can download it ourselves if you just show the staff and they'll write it down. But in the 10 years that I've been here, that's probably one of the most thorough testimonies that have ever been given to a legislative committee with research and documentation. And we really, really appreciate the fact that you came today and provided that to us. So on my behalf, and I'm sure I'm speaking for the entire committee, we appreciate the work that you went to do, and as you put it very simply, went on Google. I did it last night too, but I didn't print it. But to provide that committee and to have that now on the record as being the statements of the concerns of those of you that are working in the field, and especially the consumers that you serve. And so thank you very much for your advocacy of them. And you had another comment, Ms. Mesa, before I went to Mary Therese?
You know, he mentioned in case of disaster like Typhoon, I have to help myself during the typhoon and scream for a ride from family, relatives, or friends just to get the things I need. I don't get no help from the government for any typhoon that goes on with me. Huh? And I'm in Golden this island. I have to fend for myself. And I'm still waiting for my insurance, and it's with my social worker, and I don't know, they said it's being processed, but I've heard that for the past month, this last month.
Thank you. If you would remain after and give your name and contact numbers.
I did put it there.
No, but I mean more detailed information, because I would like to have one of my staffers follow up with.
Who did I provide it with?
Any of the two over there.
Okay.
Because I want my staff to do the investigation to assist you in trying to figure out why you're not getting your Medicaid card back. And,
okay.
Okay.
They
Please
said something about too much money, but I have a medical condition, COPD.
Okay. Well, we'll check on that one.
Okay.
But thank you. If you would please just leave your information.
Bye.
Mary Therese, I'm sorry that you stayed so long, but please.
That's right. I'm very passionate about this. That's why I'm here. And I'm very glad that you're all here. And thank you, Senator Ben, for B.J. for heading this up. You know, I came because way back in 2005, I remember we had an off-island people here, and we had people, I remember dealing with children's mental health and young adults. And so I distinctly remember Sue Smith was here, and she was talking about a registry within the police department that was done at several precincts in the states. So dealing with children, for instance. So when the police were called for an emergency with children, they had a list of kids so that they would know that those children had a disability, and then how that they needed to respond to them appropriately. It wasn't through some other kind of agency. It was just done for them immediately on the spot. And so it seemed like that it was something that was working out. You know, I can get the details on that if you would like it. You know, I know Sue was a parent, and she worked with the Federation of Family for Children's Mental Health family organization in Georgia. And so I can get that information for you about that, if it's, you know, like, because to me this is like somebody outside. I can see some of the benefits perhaps, but you know, I was part of that all those meetings for years and years and years about Get Care and all the money and all the training, and it's, now public health has got it. It's gone from DISIT to mental health, and now public health is gone. And now I'm 65, and it's for senior citizens. So now I'm still going to those meetings. And they're still having discussions, right? And so maybe something will happen one day, but it hasn't. So I think if there was to be like an agency that could help, people with disabilities, and they are called immediately, I think it would perhaps help if the police or the fire department, I remember when that boy from Palau was killed, and afterward my son had a support group. And so I remember how parents were, with young adults, were afraid to go to the police, and they were going to the fire department because the fire department would keep the young adults there for about an hour and talk to them, and they have a different approach and a different training to the police. So that brings me to the point of training. When that happened with the boy with Palau, Bernie Graychick and I actually went to meet with the police. I think Chief Suba had about 150 policemen there, and Dr. Post was there, and she was saying to the police, why don't you come to me? Why don't you come to me and just find out and learn and stuff? And so since 2005, I've been going to trainings off island 2 and 3 times a year, specifically for first responders and families of children with mental health disorders. And there's been communication across the country. There's been roundtable discussions, and there's been people collaborating with the police. Well, do you think I've been trying to do that since 2005? And it has got absolutely nowhere. And actually, Robert Camacho, who's head of the airport police, after the boy from Palau was killed, he was trying to work with the Department of Mental Health at the time, and the police didn't have training. They were there and they were not trained. And that's a crisis, putting everybody at risk. It's putting the police at risk as well. And so he and I went to the parent center for 3 weeks at 10 o'clock at night. And because I had been involved with all of this training in the States and these different precincts across the country, and family organizations collaborating with them, he and I would call the precincts, and we were talking about first responder training and talking about training. Well, I got a 40-hour curriculum from the University of Southern Florida that Memphis uses, and the top responders, they gave it to me for free. I've given it to GPD several times. It's a 40-hour curriculum. 1 day is specifically for families and clients to go and work with the police. It's accredited training, but Guam's never got the money for that. There was also another 3-hour crisis intervention training that was done through System of Care funding, that was done through Idaho. And I have given them that. I'm happy to give them to you as well. You can have the police training. And also there's another training that I really love. It's a 2-hour training that is done with families and police. It was started in Massachusetts. It's done in other parts of the country. And they have a little police pocketbook that they go through to explain disorders and what needs to be done. I also have, so the police have a pocketbook that they can keep in the car. And I've given them copies of that as well. But, we haven't had funding, so I've just given them everything, right? Also, I've given them DVDs about how to respond to children. That's the kind of thing that if it was in the precinct, when they have some downtime in the precinct, if they have information there, they can watch it and refer, because these curriculums were actually accredited. So if they've already gone through the academy, maybe they're not going to go through the academy, but there needs to be training for them, intensive training for them, so that they fully understand what people experience with disabilities. And it would be wonderful that they could have it in the precincts to watch. It's things like, Senator B.J., my name is Mary Therese. I'm Officer Mary Therese. Put the knife down, Senator B.J. Put the knife down. Senator B.J., your mother's crying. She called me. You know, they learn to use the people's names, the clients' names, over and over again. They learn to, no matter what it is, they learn little simple techniques that they could have at the precincts. And so I'm happy to, you know, I've given it to them. I'm happy to give it to you if it will make it work. The other thing that I sent senators in 2009, and I remember when the governor was being, it was when the governor was being elected. So people were busy, but I remember at the time, Benny Panala was the director of DYA, and he responded instantly to me. There's 2 policemen, and I've said it before, there's 2 policemen in England, and I'm not English, there's 2 policemen from Liverpool in England that were tasked with reducing recidivism, and 2 policemen found out how to do that, and they saved the city $11 million a year. There's a book. I've given the police the book. There's little CDs. There's a website that they use, that families participate. The police. There's these things that are available. They're willing to help. So I think it's scary, to be really honest with you. It's scary to me to think that we'll have a register, but then when the police are called, they're not trained. And it's scary to me to think that, you know, an outside agency who's not trained might be doing some training when there's curriculums available that work, which is exactly the people that Sam's talking about. We've got the curriculums here. So, you know, those were some of the concerns that I have. And I remember also when Bob Camacho was willing to do training and use the curriculums, Dr. Kiffer said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll do it," and never did it. So my concern is that people change in the agencies. You know, so if you have one person who may be all enthusiastic, the next person's not. And I've experienced it with juvenile. We've had some amazing policemen there, compassionate, kind, understanding, and supportive. And then we've had, don't worry, I know, I'm trying, I can handle it, I know. So when you've got, and then somebody who's had family members who have disabilities. So there needs to be something consistent and persistent across the board that will last no matter who's in office, no matter who's in the agency, or who's heading up the agency. Something needs to be consistent and persistent, and that's across the board so that everybody benefits. This is not fair to first responders, and it's not fair to the consumers as well. And there's huge gaps, and it's consistent. I've seen it for years and years and years.
Thank you. Your passion comes through, and your consistency and your persistency. Thank you very much for your testimony. Anybody have any questions? No? You might want to know, Benny's back at mental health. It's deputy. But again, Sam, if you would please just, at least they would copy it, and then you can have the documents back. We just need to include that in the record. All right? Thank you again for your research that you've conducted. And Ms. Mason, yes, one more, Bill. Thank you very much for allowing your testimony to be included. And thank you. I know, but you've learned to advocate for yourself, not just Mary Therese. Come in for.
I meant profiling also.
Oh.
You said profiling, that's what I meant.
Yes.
Profiling.
I know people didn't want to use that word, but I would.
Yeah, that's it. And personalized to aggressive behavior too, when they profile.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for your advocacy. We have only one bill left, Bill 74.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. An act to amend Section 13, Chapter 12, Public Law, the Budget Act, relative to enhancing fiscal discipline and efficiency by authorizing the expenditure of fiscal year 2015 continuing appropriations subject to specific requirements. There is nobody here, but we have received testimony from the Department of Administration and the Bureau of Budget in opposition to the legislation. Just as the author of the legislation, the intent of this legislation was to obviate the need for bills to be introduced, like the speaker introduced earlier. There were two bills requesting continuing operation, use of continuing appropriations that were coming from the agencies, and rather than have to deal with them seriatim, I thought maybe one amendment to the Budget Act would take care of it. BBMR could make the determination, notify the speaker about it, but I guess it's too much work for them, and they're opposed to it. With that, we stand adjourned.